After more than 20 years, he still claims he didn't do it. And now he's breaking his silence in a new docuseries. With the LA Innocence Project taking over his case, DNA testing on a single piece of duct tape could give Peterson a new trial.
Let's start by reviewing the Scott Peterson case by talking about what's out there, what the prosecution has put out there as far as their case. Scott Peterson and Lacey Rocha met San Luis Obispo, where Lacey was attending college and Peterson was working in a restaurant. They married in 1997. They opened and ran a restaurant together in San Luis Obispo. In 2000, they moved to Modesto and bought a house. Lacey took a job as a substitute teacher, while Scott ran a startup fertilizer company named Trade Corp USA out of a leased warehouse. Some years after the two married, Lacey became pregnant. The baby, whom the couple had named Connor, was due in February of 2003. On December 23rd of 2002, Lacey went grocery shopping around midday. She also had a prenatal medical checkup. In the late afternoon, both Lacey and Scott went to a salon where Lacey's sister, Amy Rocha, worked. Amy mentioned that she had ordered a gift basket for a family member that needed to be picked up the next day by 3 p.m. Scott volunteered to get it for her as he was going to be golfing nearby. Scott also invited Amy to dinner, but she declined because she had prior plans. That night, Lacey and her mother, Sharon, spoke on the phone, confirmed that Lacey and Scott would join Sharon and Sharon's longtime partner, Ron Gransky, for dinner the following night, Christmas Eve. At about 10:18 the following morning, a neighbor by the name of Karen Servas saw the Petersons' dog, Mackenzie, wandering unaccompanied on the street, wearing his leash. Scott's truck was gone. Lacey's car was still in the driveway. There were no signs of activity at the house, so Servas put Mackenzie in the Petersons' backyard and closed the gate. That afternoon, Gransky tried to reach Lacey without success. At around 3:45 p.m., Amy received a call that her gift basket had not been picked up. She was unable to reach Scott. Neighbors reported Scott's truck was still absent at about 4:05 p.m., but back by 5:30 p.m. At around 5:15 p.m., Scott called Sharon and asked if Lacey was there. He described Lacey as missing. Sharon suggested he check with neighbors and friends. Scott called Sharon back shortly afterwards and reported that the people he had spoken to had not seen Lacey either. Sharon told Gransky to call the police. Officers soon met with Scott, Sharon, and Gransky at a nearby park. Neighbors and other relatives gathered at the park as well. Gransky spoke with Scott and asked if he had gone golfing all day. Scott said he had changed his mind and gone fishing instead. Told what time Scott had gone, Gransky suggested it was unusually late to be fishing. Scott walked off without responding. Scott told a cousin of Sharon's and two neighbors that he had been golfing all day. He volunteered to Sandy Richter, a friend of Sharon's, that he would not be surprised if the police found blood because he had cut his hands at that time. Police inspected the Peterson home. There was no signs of forced entry. Nothing appeared missing, and Lacey's purse was still there. Scott told the police that he and Lacey had watched television that morning, and Lacey had planned to walk the dog and go grocery shopping. Scott decided to go fishing in the San Francisco Bay. He went to his company's warehouse where he stored a boat, drove to the Berkeley Marina, fished for 2 hours, and quit because the day was cold and rainy. He tried calling Lacey on the home phone and her cell phone, but did not reach her. Scott got home around 4:30 p.m. He washed his clothes, ate some pizza, and then called Sharon to track down Lacey. Officer Matthew Spurlock asked what time Scott was fishing. He also asked what Scott was fishing for and what lure he used. According to Spurlock and Officer Derek Letzinger, Peterson gave slow and initially non-committal answers. He really didn't give a response time. And when asked what he was fishing for, he paused and he gave a blank stare and mumbled some stuff without really answering. Scott likewise responded with a blank look when asked about his lure, but after some delay came up with a size and a color description. Detective Alan Brochini was called to the Scott Peterson home. He found wet towels on top of the washing machine. Scott explained that he had taken them out so that he could wash the clothes he had worn that day. Inside the washing machine were Peterson's jeans, shirts, and a green pullover jacket. In the bedroom, officers observed a laundry hamper nearly full of clothes. With consent, Detective Brochini examined Scott's truck and a large patio umbrella with a tarp in the truck bed. Inside the truck cab, he found a fishing rod and a bag containing a package of unused fishing lures and a receipt indicating the items had all been purchased on December 20th. Peterson handed him a Berkeley Marina parking receipt that indicated Scott had entered at about 12:54 p.m. On the back seat was a camouflage jacket Scott said he had worn fishing that day. Brochini and Scott went to Scott's warehouse, where Brochini observed what he had described as a homemade anchor made of concrete in Scott's boat, but no long rope to attach it to the boat. Scott agreed to a further interview at the Modesto police station. Scott repeated that Lacey had planned to walk the dog and go grocery shopping. For his part, Scott decided to go fishing because it was too cold to go golf. He went to his warehouse, then to the Berkeley Marina around 1 p.m. and fished for 90 minutes near an area later identified as Brooks Island. Scott did not pack a lunch or stop to eat on the way to or from the marina. On the way back, Scott called Lacey on their home phone and left 2 messages on her cell phone. He dropped off his boat at the warehouse and went home. Scott told officers that there was no problems in his marriage. Scott said he left the house with no jacket on, put on a green pullover jacket, and then put the camouflage jacket over that when it started raining. The camouflage jacket, when Detective Brochini saw it in Peterson's truck a few hours later, was dry. When messages on Lacey's cell phone were played, only one voice message from Scott was found. Scott had a follow-up interview with Detective Greg Grogan and an investigator from the State Department of Justice on Christmas Day, December 25th. Scott explained that he had never fished on the San Diego Bay before, but wanted to test out his boat. He trolled fish for an hour on the way to Brooks Island from the marina dock. Scott suggested Lacey might have been robbed of her jewelry by a transient and then kidnapped. He denied being involved in an affair with anyone. Later that day, Scott called Detective Brochini to check on the investigation. He asked if the police would be using cadaver dogs to search for Lacey. Brochini explained that they would not because no one assumed Lacey was dead. Interesting question to ask detectives when your wife is missing. In the days after Christmas, the Modesto Police Department executed search warrants on Scott's home, the Peterson home, and the Peterson's warehouse. Police confirmed that there had been no forced entry at the house. None of Lacey's jewelry was missing, other than 1 pair of diamond earrings. Traces of Peterson's blood were found on the comforter in the master bedroom, in sheds in the backyard. Police found the cover to Scott's boat smelling heavily of gasoline, as well as a blue tarp. The boat cover had chunks of concrete in it. In Scott's truck, police found additional spots of Scott's blood. Scott explained that he had cut his hand on the truck door. Police found small chunks of cement and a claw hammer with cement powder on it in the truck's bed. At trial, evidence was introduced that gasoline makes it extremely difficult for trailing dogs to identify human scent. At the warehouse, police inspected the boat and found a pair of pliers under the middle seat. The pliers had hair clamped in their teeth. Subsequent mitochondrial DNA testing of a hair fragment determined that the hair matched a reference sample from Sharon, which meant that its donors had the same maternal lineage as Sharon. The hair did not match Peterson's. During the search of the Peterson home, articles that Lacey would have touched were collected to give to trailing dogs to enable them to search for Lacey's scent. These included a slipper and a pair of sunglasses. On December 28th, 4 days after Lacey's disappearance, Trimble, A trailing dog was presented Lacey's sunglasses at Berkeley Marina. Trimble alerted to Lacey's scent along a path that led onto a dock and ended at the water. On December 30th, a woman named Amber Fry contacted the police after a friend advised her Scott, who she thought was unmarried with no children and with whom she had been having a relationship with since November, was connected to the disappearance of his pregnant wife. Amber and Scott had had their first date on November 20th and had immediately become sexually intimate. Their relationship had progressed to the point where Scott had stayed over at Amber's house, picked up Amber's young daughter from daycare, gone to various parties with Amber alone and with her daughter, picked up a Christmas tree with Amber, and discussed her views on having children. Scott initially told Amber he had never been married and had no children, but on December 6th, a friend of Amber's discovered otherwise and gave him an ultimatum to tell Amber by December 9th or else she would. On December 9th, Scott explained to Amber that he had in fact been married but had lost his wife and the upcoming holidays would be his first without her. On December 15th, Scott told Amber he would be in Europe on business through the rest of the month and much of January. On December 23rd, after Amber asked where she should send him things while he was away, Scott rented a private mailbox to which Amber could send him letters. He called Amber that day, claiming to be in Maine duck hunting with his father, and again on Christmas Day, supposedly still from Maine. After meeting with police, Amber agreed to cooperate and tape further calls from Peterson. On New Year's Eve, Scott called Amber from a vigil for Lacey, claiming to be in Paris watching the fireworks over the Eiffel Tower. He called Amber again on New Year's Day, and in the same days after, maintaining the fiction that he was in Europe. On January 3rd, 2003, when police confronted Scott with a picture of himself and Amber, Peterson denied that that was him in the photo and that he was having an affair. On January 6th, at the instigation of police, Amber dropped hints that a friend had learned the truth and would tell her in a matter of hours. In response, Scott finally admitted to Amber that he was married to a woman named Lacey and had been in Modesto the entire time. The next day, when Amber asked if Scott had told Lacey about her, Scott said he had and that Lacey was fine with his having an affair. Later in the month, once news media had made the affair public, Scott, in an interview aired nationwide, repeated that Lacey was fine with his having an affair and said he had disclosed the affair to the police immediately, which we know that was a lie. On February 19th, at the direction of police investigators, Amber told Scott they should stop talking. Lacey Peterson's disappearance swiftly became the subject of widespread media attention. To maintain the pretense that she did not know the truth about Peterson, yet Amber denied watching the news. In January, after obtaining a warrant, a police placed a surveillance camera outside the Peterson home and GPS tracking devices on Peterson's vehicle, including a series of cars and trucks Scott rented for a few days at a time. Surveillance data from these devices and visual surveillance by the police showed that Scott driving the approximately 90 miles from his home to the Berkeley Marina at least 5 times in January, each time using a different vehicle. On January 5th, he drove there in a gray Subaru, spent 5 or 10 minutes, and left. On January 6th, he returned to the marina in a red Honda and again spent only a few minutes. On January 9th, Scott drove there in a white pickup truck. And on January 11th, after determining that their coverage had been blown, the Modesto Police Department shut down surveillance at Scott's home. Nonetheless, from the tracking data supplied by the automobile's manufacturers, police were able to determine that Scott returned to the marina on January 26th in Lacey's Land Rover and on January 27th in a rented Dodge Dakota. During the same period, Scott began to make various changes to his work and living situation. On January 13th, Scott gave a 30-day notice that he was terminating his warehouse lease, which was not up until October. That same month, he started discussions to sell the Peterson home. On January 29th, Scott sold Lacey's car, trading it in for a Dodge Dakota pickup truck. On January 30th, he stopped home mail delivery and directed that all mail be delivered to the post office box that he had set up on December 23rd. The nursery for Connor was converted into a storage space. On February 18th, satellite television services to Peterson's home was canceled. The satellite company records indicate that the customer had explained he was moving overseas. A $500,000 reward was posted by a private foundation for information leading to Lacey's return. For months, no useful leads turned up. Even when potential promising sightings were reported, Scott appeared to show little interest. For example, the prosecution presented evidence collected from an authorized wiretap of Scott's phone that showed he took days to follow up with police about a possible sighting in Washington, though he told others, including his mother, that he had follow up with police immediately. So he was telling police one thing and telling the family something else. Scott similarly told a business associate he was waiting near the airport in case he needed to fly up to Washington, though at that time, Scott was not near any airport. In mid-April, a significant storm hit the San Francisco Bay Area. On April 13th, after the storm had passed, a couple walking their dog came upon Connor's badly decomposed body, apparently washed ashore along with other storm debris. The location was just over a mile from the southern tip of Brooks Island. The next morning, Lacey's body was discovered on the shoreline at Point Isabel, south of Connor's body, and again just over a mile from Brooks Island. And I'm going to give you guys the trigger warning here because we're about to describe some details that are public record, of course, but in the interest of keeping the information as valid as possible, I'm offering the biggest trigger warning right now so you guys can log off if you need to at this point. Lacey's body had barnacles and duct tape on it. From residual clumps of fabric, it was possible to determine that she had been wearing light color capris. The clothing was consistent with the recollection of Amy, who testified that Lacey was wearing cream colored pants when she last saw her sister on December 23rd. It was, however, inconsistent with the recollection of Scott, who told police that Lacey was wearing black pants when he last saw her on December 24th. Days later, DNA testing confirmed the identities of the two bodies. Dr. Brian Peterson, who is no relation to the Petersons, performed autopsies on both bodies. Lacey's body had several missing parts. Changes to the tissue suggest her body had been in a marine environment. Tidal actions and marine animals could explain the missing body parts. Lacey's uterus was still enlarged. Her birth canal was closed, and there was no evidence of a cesarean section birth, which indicates she had died while still pregnant. Dr. Allison Galloway, a forensic anthropologist, was given the remains to analyze. She testified that Lacey had been in water for 3 to 6 months. Given the condition of the body, it was not possible to determine the cause of death. Connor's body was intact. There was tape on his neck, but no associated injuries, which led Dr. Peterson to conclude that the tape was just debris that had become attached to Connor after his death. There was no clothing on his body. Connor still had parts of his umbilical cord and meconium in his intestines, which indicate he had died before birth. Based on his size and the softness of his tissue, Dr. Peterson opined that Connor must have remained protected inside Lacey's uterus for some time after death. Had he spent a significant period of time exposed in the water, he would have been eaten by marine animals. Lacey had had a prenatal checkup on December 23rd. Based on the ultrasounds, Connor was at 32 to 33 weeks of gestation. Postmortem measurements of his bone growth allowed Dr. Gregory DeVore to estimate Connor's date of death as falling between December 21st and December 24th, with an average of December 23rd. Both Dr. Esther Tauter and Lacey's gynecologist who conducted the December 23rd checkup and Dr. Peterson testified that based on his age and health, Connor would have survived had he been born on that day. Dr. Ralph Chen, a hydrologist with the United States Genealogical Survey, was contacted by the Modesto police in February, while Lacey was still missing, and then again in May after she and Connor had been found. The first time, he was asked to assume that Lacey's body had been dumped with weights into the San Francisco Bay, and based on that assumption, to estimate where the body might be found. The second time, after the body had been found, Dr. Chang was asked to estimate where they might have originated. He was able to estimate a location for Connor near the southern tip of Brooks Island, but no likely location for Lacey. Divers searched the bay at Dr. Chang's target location, were unable to find any relevant evidence. On April 12th, the day before Connor's body was found, Peterson bought a car using his mother's name, Jacqueline, as his own, providing a fake driver's license number and paying $3,600 in cash. He had grown a goatee and a mustache and appeared to have dyed his hair. On April 15th, when Sharon called him about the discovery of the bodies of Connor and Lacey, yet identified, Peterson did not return her call. Believing Scott might flee, police arrested him on April 18th. When arrested, Scott had nearly $15,000 in cash, foreign currency, 2 driver's licenses, his own and his brother's, a family member's credit card, camping gear, considerable extra clothing, and multiple cell phones. The prosecutor introduced evidence concerning the Petersons' finances. The Petersons' expenses were high in relation to their current income. Trade Corp USA had never been profitable, posting operating losses of $40,000 and $200,000 in consecutive years. The company was not meeting sales goals, and it owed its parent company $190,000. Peterson had signed multiple credit card applications in the company's name containing misrepresentations as to the company's income. In fall of 2002, Lacey inherited jewelry and, at Scott's request, had some of the items appraised. They were valued at more than $100,000. Computers seized from Scott's home and the warehouse showed emails sent from an account bearing the username SLPTE1 discussing the sale of jewelry, and eBay records likewise showed Peterson had posted jewelry items for sale. Lacey also stood to inherit 1/3 of the proceeds from the sale of her grandfather's house, an interest estimated to be worth $140,000. Lacey's interest would terminate on her death, with no right of survivorship to Scott. But it was unclear whether Scott was aware of the limitations. Brett, the co-trustee of the grandparents' estate, had not told Scott about the provision. And Brett Rocha is Lacey's brother. The prosecution also submitted additional background concerning Scott's fishing. Computer seized from the Peterson home and the warehouse showed that someone had conducted searches of classified advertisements for boats on December 7th, the day after Scott learned he would no longer be able to conceal his marriage from Amber. The same day, Scott called Bruce Peterson, no relation, about a boat for sale. Peterson inspected the boat the next day and bought it on December 9th without the anchor that came with the boat. Scott never registered the boat, nor did he ever mention the purchase to his father. To Gransky, an avid fisherman who had invited Scott to fish several times, to other members of the Rocha family, or to his friend Gregory Reed, with whom he had frequently discussed fishing. Review of the seized computer's browser's histories also shows someone conducted searches on December 8th for boat ramps on the Pacific Ocean, then examining nautical charts, currents, and maps for the Berkeley Marina and San Francisco Bay, including the area around Brooks Island. There were also visits to fishing-related websites. On December 24th, the day Scott said he was fishing, was gray, damp, and cold with a bit of wind. Few people were at the Berkeley Marina. When questioned by police, Scott would not say what he was hoping to catch. But the phishing searches performed from his computer earlier that month had indicated searches related to sturgeon and strip bass. The prosecution's theory was as follows. Scott killed Lacey sometime on the night of December 23rd or morning of December 24th. On the morning of the 24th, Scott let his dog Mackenzie out with his leash on to make it appear something had happened while Lacey was walking him. He wrapped Lacey's body in a tarp in the bed of his truck, covered her with the patio umbrella, drove to the warehouse, and then moved her body into his boat. He drove to the Berkeley Marina, motored out to an area near Brooks Island, and slipped her body, attached to homemade concrete weights, like the homemade anchor Scott had made, into the bay. Scott then returned to Modesto, dropped off the boat at the warehouse, put the boat cover out back under a leaky gas blower so that any scent would be obscured, washed his clothes, and proceeded with the ruse that Lacey was missing, hoping her body would never be discovered. So we have no crime scene. Okay, this is just a theory. A lot of this is what you would consider circumstantial evidence, how Scott Peterson was convicted. Okay, and for those that don't know what circumstantial evidence means, it's truly indirect evidence that does not, on like face value, prove a fact. However, gives rise to a logical inference that the facts exist. That's what it seems like to me. We have no murder weapon. We don't know the cause of death, and we don't have a crime scene. We have a man that has lied a lot, and that's what we have so far. With that, let's review some of the Scott Peterson interviews. Now, this is the interview that he did with Diane Sawyer, and we're going to be using this under fair use, of course. We're going to be giving commentary as well.
Did you murder your wife?
No, I did not. And I had absolutely nothing to do with her disappearance. And use the word murder, and yeah, I mean, that is a possibility. It's not one we're ready to accept, and it creeps in my mind late at night and early in the morning. And during the day, all we can think about is the right resolution is to find her well.
But as
you know, one thing I was really trying to be very mindful about Scott Peterson's affect is because people were talking about it's his affect that makes him guilty. And I was really, like, honestly, reviewing some of these old interviews, I really wanted to step back and get away from that, because what we've come to find out, at least in my opinion, is that throughout the time, people have different affects when it comes to certain situations, confrontation, trauma, things that they're experiencing, nervousness. For those that don't understand what affect is, it's a term that a lot of people, especially in the mental health field, use to talk about how a person expresses their emotions. Okay. So if I say they have a flat affect, right? Or their affect is this way or that way, it's really just kind of getting to the nitty gritty of like how they're expressing their emotions in that time. Now he is being asked, like, did you murder your wife? And there's a little smirk to him. There's a little like smile. He's like, I'm really like, I'm trying to get away from that. That's not at all. We're hoping that that's not the case. And I could see where some of the folks, back then might have been like, I would not be reacting that way if I was being asked that. Even myself, I don't think I would be, reacting this way if I was being asked such a question. I don't know. I've also heard that there might have been some autism running in his family. I'm not really sure if he's been formally diagnosed. That's not something that I want to do. But I kind of wonder, like, if there are other like traits in his history that would lead for his reaction to be this way, or his reaction to certain questions to be a certain way.
as you know, increasingly in the public, suspicion has turned on you.
Yes, definitely.
Did you ever hit her? Did you ever injure her?
No. My God, no. Violence towards women is unapproachable. It is the most disgusting act to me. And I know that suspicion has turned me. And it's turned me, one, because I'm her husband. And that's a natural thing, and I've heard all the statistics on all the news shows about that being, someone that a husband, ex-husband, a boyfriend that is statistically one who would be responsible for her disappearance.
So to add to this too, let's also keep in mind that Scott Peterson was never convicted of anything prior to this. I mean, I don't even think he had like a parking ticket. His record was pretty clean, and then this happened, right? Keep that in mind.
And I'm sorry, I forgot your question.
Did you ever hit her? Did you ever injure her?
No, never. I was answered your question because of the suspicion that it's been turned to me. And it turned to me because of the inappropriate romantic that I had with Amber Fry.
Amber Fry went public about the romance after seeing all the stories about Lacey Peterson's disappearance.
So let's keep in mind that Amber Fry, of course, went public, and we read a little bit of what the prosecution had to say about Amber Fry and she working with them and was recording some of these calls. I vividly remember the phone call that aired, and I remember it so well back when this case was going on because it was on all news sources. The phone call where, he's calling her and he's pretending to be like in Paris or something like that. For whatever reason, that just stays on my mind. I don't know why, but maybe because of the level of lying, the level of just manipulating and trying to control the situation. And I don't know what made him think that he wasn't going to get caught. Does that make sense? Like, what made this man think that he wasn't going to get caught in so many lies? And the thing is, it's hard because how do you differentiate a murderer from a liar? Like, I'm not saying that, people that lie murder, but you do have to kind of wonder, like, if you lied about these details and if you've been lying about these other details, what else have you not lied about? And it makes it very hard to even give credibility to a person like this, if you know what I mean.
Glad she did.
You are?
Definitely.
Why?
It's the appropriate thing to do. And it really shows what a person of character she is.
He's glad that Amber Fry came out. And it shows the character that she is. Okay.
Allows us to get back looking for Lacey.
Did you tell her that you were not married?
I did. And then when Lacey disappeared, I called her, and admittedly it wasn't immediately. It was a couple days after Lacey's disappearance. I telephoned her and told her the truth.
The truth?
That I was married, that Lacey disappeared. She didn't know about it at that point.
No, you didn't have a choice, Scott, at this time. Like, you were going to be found out. And I think you caved under this pressure. But at the same time, like, it makes me think, what if Amber Fry never spoke out? Like, what if Amber Fry had stayed quiet? What would have happened? Just curious to know about this.
And then she contacted the police.
But Fry says she first found out about Lacey from the news, not from Scott.
Were you in love with her?
No.
Was this the first time? Are there others out there?
No.
There's no one else who can come forward?
No. I owe a tremendous apology to everyone.
Had you told anyone? Did you tell police?
Told the police immediately.
When?
That was the first night we were together. So the police, I spent with the police.
You told them about her?
Yeah, from December 24th on.
That wasn't true, and Scott Peterson called us after the interview to set the record straight. He said he never told the police about his affair with Amber Fry. But
yes, Amber Fry came forward to the police and let them know what was going on. Then she assisted the prosecution. She assisted the police by, doing like a sting, basically, and recording some of these calls. I just don't understand. So he lies in this interview, and then he calls Diane Sawyer or whatever, and then says, just kidding. I want to set the record straight. Doesn't want to set the record straight while in the interview, but after the interview.
Claims he did tell his wife.
Did your wife find out about it?
I told my wife.
When?
In early December.
y'all, look at his face. it's, you know, he's lying. Like, you just, like, you see the lie out of his face. Okay, I'm just, and you know, may Lacey and Connor rest in peace, but like, I just don't see Lacey in my, and not that I know her or anything, but based on what her family has said, she is 8 months pregnant. She's gonna be okay with any of this? With I don't know, y'all. I don't know.
Did it cause a rupture in the marriage?
It was not a positive. Obviously, it's inappropriate. But it was not something that we weren't dealing with.
A lot of arguing?
No. I can't say that even she was okay with the idea, but it wasn't anything that would break us apart.
There wasn't.
What? Now you know that that's a lie too. You just know that that's a lie too. It is.
Wasn't a lot of anger?
No.
Do you really expect people to believe that an 8.5-month pregnant woman learns her husband has had an affair and is saintly and casual about it?
Yep. No.
Accommodating? Makes a peace with it?
Nope.
Well, you don't know. No one knows our relationship but us. And that's.
Let me just say this. I have a feeling, okay, and I mean, I didn't really look into this too much, but I was like, before Amber Fry, or even during Amber Fry, who knows? I have a feeling that this man was probably cheating on Lacey for quite some time. You see the normalcy, I think for me is that he's only upset that he couldn't control the situation. He got caught with the cheating. Now, again, a cheater doesn't mean that he's a murderer, so keep that in mind. But at the same time, he was convicted. I also consider the fact that a lot of this is circumstantial, so kind of keep that in mind, right? But I don't know. Something about it just makes, I have a feeling that he's been cheating on Lacey a lot more than just Amber Fry. Like, there probably was others that have never really come out or said anything. Amber Fry just happens to be one that cooperated with the police because she's thinking she's on some long-term relationship with this man, and she's finding out all this stuff about him. Like, yeah.
At peace with it, not happy about it.
Why did you tell her?
It was the right thing.
Because again, you know that people sitting at home have imagined that either you were in love with someone else, therefore you decided to get rid of this entanglement, namely your wife and your child, or there was just an angry confrontation.
Neither of those was the case. It's that simple.
He insisted all was well between him and Lacey.
Tell me about the state of your marriage. What kind of marriage was it?
God, I mean, the first word that comes to mind is, glorious. I mean, we took care of each other very well. She was amazing.
She was amazing. Y'all see that? It was glorious. No marriage is glorious, y'all. I'm just saying. Nobody says that. I can, okay, like I said, I'm trying to be but like, it was glorious. She was amazing. Then why cheat? But you told Lacey that you were cheating on her, but you didn't tell Amber. I don't know.
It is amazing.
When Scott Peterson's parents and other family members joined the interview, they said their faith in his innocence never wavered, even though they were surprised about the affair.
Susan, what was your reaction when you heard?
I was very shocked, to be quite honest. It's not in Scott's character.
And when you hear people now out in the country say, did he do it? What do you want to say to them?
He couldn't have if
Possible.
it's impossible. If he knew Scott, he's the gentlest soul I think I've ever known.
The police interviewed Scott Peterson 3 times, but after he got a lawyer, he did not talk to them again. His house was searched twice, and more questions about his behavior began to surface.
A neighbor says that the first thing that Lacey did every morning was pull open the curtains. But this morning, they were never pulled open.
Yeah, they were down when I returned. It's very common in the summer that she opens up the curtains. But again, we're talking about a day that, I don't know what it was, probably 40 degrees that day or something. And during the winter, we don't open the curtains to keep the house warm.
Nothing to that. Nothing suspicious.
No, I mean, certainly I wish if something had happened to her in the house, I wish they'd been open so someone may have been able to stop it. But in the winter, who opens their curtains for the draft?
Another story that is out there is that the kitchen was spotless.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, there was still a wet mop around, which indicated somebody had cleaned something very recently.
Lacey was mopping the floors when I left that morning. Yes, the house is spotless. She had a cleaning lady on Monday, the 23rd.
So if the cleaning lady had been there, why have to clean again?
Dog, 2 cats, muddy backyard. She mopped those floors every day.
If he had murdered her, okay, as it's been, of course he's been convicted, and there was a cleaning lady, I'm kind of wondering, well, did the cleaning lady get there that morning, or like what happened exactly, and how regular the cleaning lady was there? Did she witness something? Because that's not something that's been like looked into as far as the court. Or maybe it has, and I haven't even really had the chance to look into it a little bit more. But I'm wondering about this too, this cleaning lady. But also the point of like, why is she cleaning if she's got a cleaning lady? Yeah, animals, okay. Animals you clean often, right? But she's also 8 months pregnant. I mean, nesting, I don't know. These are kind of things to kind of consider too.
And I emptied the bucket when I returned that afternoon.
There was one report that a neighbor had seen you loading something into a vehicle.
I haven't seen that report.
Did you load anything into a vehicle? Anything large?
Some umbrellas, some market umbrellas. Those are those, the umbrellas on the stands that are 8 feet in diameter or something like that.
When did you do that?
That morning.
If all these actions seem suspicious, they're still circumstantial.
I want to go back to a couple of other questions people have. I've heard so many people say, Christmas Eve, you have a very pregnant wife, and you decide to go fishing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, first child, very pregnant wife. Who leaves their pregnant wife to go fishing? Then again, who has an affair while their wife is pregnant? 8 months. Can give birth,
What does that say about the two of you?
Well, we had plans that evening with Lacey's mom, over at her house. Frankly, Christmas preparations were done.
What did you get her for Christmas?
Oh, a Louis Vuitton wallet. But preparations were made. Her plan for the day was to prepare gingerbread cookies. My day was open to either play golf or go fishing. I chose fishing that day, which is, a choice I made, and I obviously regret now. If I could just decide to stay home, That's what ought to have happened.
I noticed during the interview he had not yet talked about something.
You haven't mentioned your son.
It's so hard.
Their baby boy was due on February 16th.
Tell me about the nursery.
Can't go in there. The door is closed until there's someone to put in there. But it's ready.
Throughout the interview, he insisted he was innocent.
Are you afraid police will arrest you?
No. I know there's no basis. I mean,
He has a little tear. I don't know if you guys can see it, but he had a little tear. Like I said, this is a hard one because it's hard to kind of like assess emotion, from his affect to some of the lying, the way he lies, because we're watching this man lie, okay? But he did tear up, and I just noticed that.
I had nothing to do with their disappearance. So there's no possible evidence or anything like that.
Have they given you reason to think that you're their prime suspect?
Yeah, I mean, with with the search warrants for the cars and things like that, certainly. With the a search warrant for the home, when it gets specific to a car, obviously they're looking at me.
We will be reviewing another interview on another video, as well as I kind of want to read what the defense had to say about Scott Peterson to figure out what their defense was at the time of the trial, because I'm very curious. There's been so many attorneys that have written opinions about this case that I kind of want to know where everybody stands. Do you guys think that this man is innocent? Have y'all changed your mind about it? Some of you guys have left me very interesting comments that said, I never thought he was guilty. Some folks have said, no, he's guilty, very guilty. And, everybody's kind of like on a divide here. This is why I find this case to be so interesting, because where do people stand? That's the question. Y'all let me know your thoughts in the comments. And first of all, thank you so much for supporting my channel, hitting the like button and subscribing. I appreciate everybody. These videos take time to do, and you guys know that. So any support, likes, whatever you can do, please and thank you. Y'all are awesome. I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye, guys.